With the help of Hashem, we are learning Moed Katan Daf Chai Daf Yud Ches. We left off on Daf Yud Zayin Amid Beis, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid. We are going to start today to learn about the prohibition of cutting one's nails on Chol HaMoed. Similarly, the prohibition for an oval to cut the oval's nails. We're speaking about fingernails. We're going to speak soon about toenails. And the isur of an oval of cutting nails is both during the Shiva and during the Shloshim. We're going to have here the very important statement of Shmuel, Amar Shmuel, that halacha, kedivrei hamekel ba'avel, that by avelus we paskin like the lenient opinion. And as we'll speak out, this is not because of the rule that Safek de Rabbanan L'Kula, even according to the Rishonim that hold that avelus, or at least some of the avelus, is indeed asan midoi raisa. Still, the rule of avelus is that Safek avel is we're makel whenever there's a doubt as who we should follow in the laws of avelus. We're going to move on to laundering on Chol HaMoed. We're going to have a Mishnah Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis that's going to speak about the circumstances in which it is going to be permitted to write on Chol HaMoed. We'll speak about documents that are needed either to avoid a personal or a financial loss. We're going to have Shmuel's statement on Yud Ches Amud Beis that even though we learned above that one may not have a nisuyin, we may not get married on Chol HaMoed. Nevertheless, Shmuel holds that we are allowed la'ades isha b'choyloi shel moed, that we are allowed to initiate and to affect the kiddushin part, the halachic engagement part of first step in marriage on Chol HaMoed. And as Shmuel explains, because of the concept of Shema Yikadmenu Acher. Because if you don't make Kiddushin right now, the sooner the better, then maybe someone else is going to have Kiddushin with your Kala to be. And all of this is going to open up the discussion in the Gemara. How can we say that? Don't we know that it's already predetermined who is going to marry whom? And Shmuel therefore adds, or the Gemara clarifies, that Shmuel says, Shema Yikadmenu Acher Berachamim, that through Tefilla something could happen. Now, obviously, there are many ways of learning the Gemara. We're going to learn Gemara Rashi, which is going to be a very unique approach as to what Tefilla could affect when it comes to one's marrying one's Bashert. And on the end of Daf Yud Ches, we're going to be speaking about the very important topic in the Gemara about rumors. And we open up by making a very, very powerful statement that Ein Adam Nechshad B'davar Ele Imkein Asoi, that one will not be suspected in committing a certain misbehavior only if that person is somehow connected to that misbehavior. It doesn't mean, as we'll see, that every rumor is true, so we're going to limit that, but still there's going to be the concept that when there's smoke, then there's fire, and how that plays into halacha, when halacha will have to take into account a rumor. Obviously, rumor is not proof, but there is some substance if there is a rumor that someone is doing X, Y, or Z with many other pratim. Without any further ado, let us start on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, beginning with nail cutting. Tanach Rabbanan, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amud. Says the Gemara Tanach Rabbanan, just like people may not cut their hair on Chol HaMoed, says Rabbi Yehuda that a person is not allowed to cut one's nails on Chol HaMoed. However, argues Rabbi Yossi is mater. Now, we have 2 very important approaches in the Rishonim why Rabbi Yossi is mater. Number 1 is because why did we aser cutting the hair? What did we learn in the beginning of this Perek? Because the Chachamim were afraid that if a person would have been allowed to cut one's hair, on Chol HaMoed, the person would not take a haircut before Yom Tov, and they would enter the Yom Tov unkempt, menuvel. So now that a person knows, on Chol HaMoed, I am not allowed to take a haircut, that person will therefore take a haircut out of Yom Tov. Rabbi Yossi holds that since having long nails is so uncomfortable and not good, people are uncomfortable with it, no one needs encouragement to cut their nails before Yom Tov. Everyone is going to do it on their own. No need to make exeter. Approach number 2, which is very important, is because nails, as we know, need to be cut a lot more often than hair. So therefore, even if a person cut one's nails out of Yom Tov, as everyone does, in middle of Chol HaMoed, many people are going to feel they have to cut their nails again. And that's why Rabbi Yossi allows it. Now, this latter opinion, if you remember in the beginning of the Perek, we spoke out the machlokes between Rabbeinu Tam and the Tur regarding someone who did take a haircut, or for the people who trimmed their beards. Someone trimmed their beard out of Yom Tov, but now it grew out, and they also want to trim it again. So the Rabbeinu Tam Taka says you are allowed to do it. The Tur is machmir. Interestingly, many poskim say that even though we paskin like the Tur, that is only during those times where people would cut their hair only once in 30 days. A person would only touch their beard if those people who touch their beards once in 30 days. But if you're living in a time, which is what many poskim argue nowadays, that those people who trim their beards, they do that every day or almost every day, so it becomes like nails. And even though we can follow the Tur, but right now, that is like cutting the nails. And as we'll see, we paskin like Rabbi Yossi. So this is a very important topic as to the reason for Rabbi Yossi. Bottom line is, Rabbi Yehuda Atzers, Rabbi Yossi is matir. Another detail regarding nail cutting, says the Gemara, says the Braisa, that similarly, just like an Avel may not cut one's hair during the time of his Avelus, similarly, he may not cut his nails. Again, this is only the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. However, Rabbi Yossi is matir. In both cases, it's a dual machlokes, always each one saying the same opinion, both by Chol HaMoed and by Avelus. The final line in the Abid, Amarula, that halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda ba'avel, that an avel may not cut one's nails. However, halacha ki Rabbi Yossi b'moyed, that you are allowed to cut your nails during Chol HaMoed. That is what Ula says. Shmuel goes further. Shmuel Amar, Daf Chai, Daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph, halacha ki Rabbi Yossi, both b'moyed and ba'avel. Why? Because the Amar Shmuel, no, it's not only are we lenient by Chol HaMoed, but Shmuel is the one that introduces us to the concept halacha ki divrei hamekel ba'avel. And again, this is important, even according to the Rishonim that hold that some of Avelus is midayid Aisa, like a person passed away. Not only Aninus, that first day of passing prior to burial is Doyed Aisa, but if the burial happened the way ideally it should on the day of the passing, until the end of the day, many Rishonim hold that you are still, now you are in Avelus midayid Aisa. Even when there is a din da'iraisa of Avelus, still we're going to be lenient. This is not connected to being, like we said, Safik de Rabban and Lekula. So explains Tosfos explicitly in Masechtus Eruvin. Let's move on with a few stories. Says the Gemara, Pinchas, the brother of the great Shmuel, Isra, Bey, or the Bach says, Lei Milsa. Some tragedy happened to him, and as the Rishonim speak out, he lost, Rahman al-Islan, he lost a child. So he's sitting Shiva. He's in mourning. Al Shmuel, his brother Shmuel comes, Lemishel, Ta'amamine, a very interesting expression. We would say he went to be Menachem Abel. He went to console him. For some reason, the Gemara words that he went to ask Ta'ama, how is his tam, or how is his feelings? He went to console him. However, Shmuel saw that Chazanuhu letufrei ta'avan nefisha. He saw that his brother's Pinchas's nails, his fingernails were very long. And Shmuel asked him, obviously, like we just learned, that Shmuel, Paskin, Halachi ki Rabbi Yossi, both b'moyed u'ba'avel, Shmuel thought you can cut your nails. So Amalei, to which his brother Pinchas responds, and this is very tragic, what happened, even the day Hava, if you would have been mourning, God forbid, no one should ever say that. Would you be so mizalzel, but would you cut your nails? Now, says the Gemara that we have a pasuk in Koheles regarding the power of speech, especially when it's articulated by greater people. And this is the expression, that this became like a shigaga sheyoytze milifnei hashalit, that if a ruler, if a king, even erroneously, b'shoygeg, gave a verdict, people will many times execute that verdict because the king said it. And therefore, Rahman al-Islam, that brought about a tragedy in the household of Shmuel, Isra Bey Milsa b'Shmuel. And Shmuel knew that the reason why something happened to him is because of that expression of his brother Pinchas. Now, Pinchas went to be Menachem Abu. Oh, Pinchas, achoyed l'mishul tama minei. And Shmuel, in his upsetness, Ishaklinu letufrei Shmuel cut his nails. He gathered his nails and chavatinu la'ape, and he threw it at his brother. And Amar Lane, he tells his brother, Leis lach b'ris karusalas fasayim. Don't you know that there was a covenant that's made to the lips, again, the koyach of speech? Interestingly, we brought here another pasuk, and the Amar Rav Yechon in the 9 shabris karusalas fasayim, because it says, and this is a pasuk in Vayera, this is in the positive, that what? That Vayomer Avram al Na'arav, Shulach and Playim Achamoy, the Ani v'Hanar and I Avram, and the lad means Yitzchak, Nelcha at Koi v'nishtach. We're going to go, we're going to bow down to God, and Avram Avinu slipped. And he said, "V'nashuva aleichem, we will return." You see, and Taka, that's what happened. And Yitzchak returned. Yitzchak did not pass away. The Istaya Milsa, the Hadur Tarvayu. Very interesting. There's not enough time, but you have to appreciate the challenge with this proof. Hashem never told him to shecht him. There's so many steps. B'chlal, again, why did he change from Bris Krusalis Vasayim to the Bishkishgaga Hayosim Elifnei Hashalat? That you can answer because the shgaga sheyotzim elifnei hashalat is only if the one who said the words is a shalat. And Shmuel was upset at his brother. He didn't call his brother a shalat. Even if you're not a ruler, still bris krusalas fasayim. Now we have a big problem here. The big problem here is, and the Gemara is going to speak about it, and we know this from the way we live our Yiddishkeit, is that there is a danger to throw nails out there. When a person cuts their nails, they will see whether they bury it, whether they burn it, and if you stop throw it, you're considered a Rasha. We're going to have to address how Shmuel did that. Actually, let's quickly read the Rashi. Rashi says 6 lines from the top, that reading inside the Rashi, that Zarkinu meroiv Kaas, Shmuel was angry at his brother and he threw it from Kaas, but right away he gathered it in order not to be included in the category that those who throw their nails is considered a rush. Okay, now let's go on. Says the Gemara that Savru Minei, that initially we understood that Shmuel's leniency, and by the way, you see that Shmuel's leniency regarding cutting the nails with Paskin like Rabbi Yossi isn't only during the Shloshim, it's even during the Shiva. He was sitting Shiva. That's only the Yad, yeah. But the Regaloi, because, fingernails are repulsive if they're very long, especially if they didn't have running water, there was dirt that accumulated under it. Toenails are covered. So, cutting the nails is already considered a little bit of an indulgence or something beyond the need. However, not true. That I know to me they clarified the opinion of Shmuel. That he holds even during Shiva you can cut both finger and toenails. Now, I want you to know that genustere is either scissors or genustere is a nail clipper. In other words, a keli that's made to cut nails, that's already asur. Now, this doesn't mean so hold Shmuel. This is Rav. You cut it, but with a shinoi. That's the way we would word it. And Hitaka did his nails. We are correlating Cholamoid and Avelus, and you can be lenient on Cholamoid, right? That's even according to Ula. But here he cut it with his teeth and Vizarkino when he threw it. So now says the Gemara, Shmami not las. From the behavior of Rabbi Yechon, we learn 3 dinim. Number 1, Shmami not din. Number 1, mutter little tziparnai b'chayil shalmoyed. Attack it with your teeth. Shmami not. Number 2, ein behem mishum mius. One would have argued that there is a laugh called Bal Tishatsu es nafshei seichem. I know this pasuk is written in Shmini regarding eating shiratzim, but we apply it to many other areas in halacha. And one might have argued that biting the nails with one's mouth, with one's teeth, is considered repulsive, and it would not be allowed, certainly if you're doing it in public. So here we see it's not considered repulsive. And number 3, Shmamina mutal zarka, because Rabbi Yechon threw it. Now that's a problem. So Mela, again, we learned that Rashi, that when Shmuel threw his nails on his brother, he right away gathered it. But not by Rabbi Yechon. Did we not learn? Now we also had a nidam that there are 3 things regarding what to do with cut nails. HaKoivim, those who bury it, are considered a tzaddik. Because let's just speak out right now, and this, according to many Rishonim, is a ruchniistic thing, connected to the fact that before the Chet of Adam and Chava, there was some sort of nail type of covering that protected all of the human body. And as a result, as a consequence of the Chet, which was initiated by Chava, we lost those nails, and as a remembrance, as a zecher, we have the finger and toenails. So the nails they bring out the Chet. And therefore, that's one of the approaches of the Rishonim, that if a woman who's pregnant walks over nails, there's a danger that it can affect in a terrible way the child that she's carrying. So a tzaddik will bury it. Problem with burial is that maybe it will get uncovered. So a chassid goes beyond the letter of the law. Burying is enough. But how do you make sure that it can never get uncovered? You burn it. So someone who burns it is a chassid. Like we spoke out when we learned Nida, again, this is a ruchniistic thing, that just like, God forbid, cremation is on so many levels so prohibited, including that the Rebbe writes that the same tsar a person feels if they are burnt alive, Rahman al-Islam, that's the tsar that the neshama feels if their body is being cremated. That is also true beruchnius to any part of our bodies. That means that even when the nail of the finger, when the fingernail is being burned, it creates pain to the neshama. A chassid that's the chassid. Even though it hurts him, since it takes away the possibility of it hurting someone else, let it hurt me. Let it be detrimental to me. Someone else should never get hurt. That's why he's called a chassid. So he will burn it. On the other hand, someone who just throws the nails, they are a rasha. And Tamamai, Shema Tavra Lenishu, Badavatapa. So answers the Gemara, why is there a problem with throwing it? Because if a pregnant woman is going to walk over it, then she might lose her child. And since Rabbi Yochanan was learning in the Beis Midrash, Isha Be Midrash Lo Shchicha, the woman did not learn in the Beis Midrash. They didn't have Beis Yaakov's then. So if you are in a location where it cannot cause damage, then there is no problem. Still, the Gemara says, but people, they sweep up the floor in the Beis Midrash every now and then. It might get gathered, and then you throw it out there, and out there, outside the Beis Midrash, you can have men and women. So the Gemara answers a very important thing, that when do fingernails or toenails have that ruchniistic power of doing damage, that's only if they are in the place where you threw them initially. But Kivin, the Ishtani, once they move locations, then Ishtani, they are moved and they can no longer do any damage. Okay. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Zug. Zug means a pair of Talmidei Chachamim. Once came from a location called Mechamasan, and they came to Rebbe. Now, the following was said either in the name of Rav, or Mazutri had the same exact event, but not quoted in the name of an Amoira, but he actually had it in a Braisa. Masnei. This following was written already in a Braisa. Zuk, but and they asked him, what is he paskin regarding Tzipor Nayim? We're speaking here about Avelus, not about Cholamoyed. And Vehitolahem. Not only was he matir, now we're going further. Had they asked Rebbe whether they are allowed to trim their mustache, and we will not put the mustache in the category of facial hairs. It's a whole different category. He also would have been matir it. Shmuel says, not if they would have asked him. No, they taka asked him. Av bikshum memenu safa and v'hiter lohem. Now, how much of the mustache may be cut? So Amar Avitul Safra in the name of Rav or in the name of Rav Papa. And now the Gemara is going to quote other sayings from the same Amoida. Safa mizavius lazavius. We're speaking about cutting the mustache from one corner of the mouth to the other corner of the mouth and not beyond it. And because this has to do with the fact that it becomes either uncomfortable or at times repulsive if the mustache gets in the way of eating. And that's why you are allowed to cut it, even an oval. And how much of it can you cut? Again, he's giving the location from one corner of the mouth to the other. Rabami adds a detail that is only ubesafa hamerkav, is only if it's getting in the way of food, and not all the way up until under the nose, or any other scenario where if it's not getting in the way of food, then Rebbe would not have been materit. That I, being that I'm more refined, and even if my mustache is already short, and even if it's not getting in the way of food, I hold that you can trim all of your mustache. Not a problem at all. By the way, when I say the word trim, truth be told, a mustache is not considered part of the beard, and the isurim of, God forbid, never putting a razor to the halachic 5 corners of the beard doesn't apply to the mustache. He was more lenient when it came to the trimming of his mustache. Okay, good. Now that we quoted Avitul Safraps, not that common, in the name of Rav or in the name of Rav Papa, let's quote other statements that he made. Amar Avitul Safra in the name of Rav or in the name of Rav Papa. That Paroi, the Pari is a generic word. Pari means like the president, the Caesar. So that Pari that was in the life of Moshe, he was unusually, he was only an amma tall. He was a midget, and his beard was 1 amma. Speaking about mustaches and beards. And parmashtaki means his male organ was more than an amma, was an amma and a zeres. Guys, a zeres is the space between, if you open up your palm, right, and the space between your pinky and your thumb. So there's 2 zeres in 1 amma. So it was like an amma and a half. Now, does that mean that physically? Maybe yeah, maybe not. It means that he was such a bal taiva. That's all he was. His taiva was 1.5 times him. That there are times that God chooses the lowliest of person to be the rulers. That Pari was a very lowly person because he was very unhealthily indulgent in taiva. In the name of Rav, in the name of Rav Papa. Another statement. The Pari that was in the times of Moshe. Am gushi however, we had this machlokes above. Rashi reminds us here from a Masechta Shabbos daf Ayin Hey. The machlokes, either am gushi means that he was a sorcerer, or am gushi means that he considered himself to be a god by Elyahu, that I made myself. I'm a self-made man. Really, sorcery and blasphemy are very near one to the other. But many times in the Torah where the Arisurim of Avodah Zarah, connected to that, the 1 notch lower is the practice of the dark arts. So he was either this or that. As it says, Hine Yotzei Hamayma, and Rashi reminds us, how does that prove? So if he was a machashev, so there's a certain koyach of kishuv that you get when you're standing near water. That's why God told Moshe to go with the party when he's Yotzei Hamayma. That is why he practiced his kishuv. If Amgushi means that he was a blasphemer, that he considered himself to be a deity, that was the whole word, because we know that there was a bracha and the Nile went up to him. That is where he felt the most empowered, that he's a god, or that was the source of his economy. And Rashi just rechazers over the Gemara and Shabbos, this or that. Now, Atkan, the sugya of hair cutting, which led us into nail cutting, and now we're going to go to laundering. Says the Gemara. Says in the Mishnah, these are the people that we give the exception that they are allowed to launder. Again, if they had no option to do laundry prior to. We have this quoted above. If a person only has 1 shirt, 1 jalaba, the word is, again, like nail cutting, because even though you did it, you washed your garment out of Yom Tov, you didn't enter Yom Tov Menuvel. It gets dirty. It's dirty again. If Rabbi Yechanan is right, when it says in our Mishnah, etc., the Mishnah gave exceptions. Why didn't the Mishnah give this exception as well? Does that not teach us by implication that we don't agree with that? Maybe honey, only the ones mentioned in the Mishnah, yes, you can do laundry on Chalamoy, but Misha Ein Leilachal Kechaloy, so Amalei Yaakov Leivimia, Asbirullah Masnis. No, not necessarily true. Second to last line, the Mishnah is speaking about someone, Afagav the Islay today, a person who has 2 shirts or more, but a matanfi, they're soiled. So that's what the Mishnah says, that if you came in the Dinas Hayam, people know you were unable to do it before, you can do it on Chalamoy. Someone who only has 1 chaluk is not what the Mishnah is talking about, so no inference could be made, and Rabbi Yechanan stands. Next, Sholach Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yaakov Bar Gi Yoidei, in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. Last line in the Amid. Another exception. Linen garments are allowed to be cleaned. There are 2 reasons. Number 1, Very important, because it requires very little effort. We're not paskening. I know you're not allowed to do laundry on Chol HaMoed, but the people that discuss the topic, again, nowadays that we have machines, they quote this Gemara. Because here we have a shita that holds that if it's very little tircha needed, which is the one reason for klei pishtan, then you are allowed to do it. And there's another. The other approach is because klei pishtan soil very easily. So it doesn't even help for you to clean it before Yom Tov. It's going to get dirty anyways again. And by the way, the getting dirty again, halacha l'maisa, everyone allows for babies, children's, they say until 2 years old or maybe a little bit older, to be washed on Chol HaMoed because of this latter way of understanding klei pishtan. Because it soils, a child is soiling their clothing. You washed it before it got dirty again. Same thing we had in the Mishnah regarding, remember, hand tiles. So here we have the same kasha. So Masav and Rava, again, Rabbi Yochanan gave a heter. The Mishnah gave heterim. Why wouldn't the Mishnah mention it? It says in our Mishnah, the exceptions, mitpuchais hayadayim, hand towels, like we said, because Yutaka cleaned it before, but then it got dirty again. And mitpuchais hasaparim, guys, daf yud chesamud base. We touched that a barber put some sort of a garment around the begadim of the person getting the haircut. And even though normally you may not get a haircut on Chol HaMoed, but there are exceptions. So if he's giving two people that were freed from jail a haircut on Chol HaMoed, so between one haircut and the other, that was the halach yelech. They would wash those cloths that barbers would put. So that's the exception. So again, why don't we say by inference only hane in klei pishtan loy, not like in Rabbi Yochanan? So here again, Amalei Abaya, no. Our Mishnah is speaking about the sha'ar minei, garments that are not made out of linen. Not made out of linen, then a hand towel, yeah. The barbers, not others. Rabbi Yochanan is speaking about something the Mishnah was not talking about. In other words, you can't infer by the exceptions of the Mishnah by it not also mentioning this one. Amar bar Hedia, Lididi Chazali Yamat Shal Tveria. He used to go to Tveria, Chol HaMoed, and the Mapkele Mishchele the Monday Kitana. He saw people going to the riverbank with basket full of linen garments, and they would wash it. In Tveria, everyone washed linen garments. That's a raya to Rabbi Yochanan. So Maskav Lo Avaya, what proof is that? Man leimu lachta b'ritzayin chachamim avdi. Dilma shalei b'ritzayin chachamim avdi. Now this is a very important Gemara. When we're speaking about certain, there's different levels of Isuri D'Rabbanan. And some of them, you can argue that if this would have been Asur, then the fact that this was done in public is a raya that it's mutter. Number one. Number two, another thing. There's a concept called mutar shiur shoygin va'al tiyu mezidin. And I can relate that this Isur of doing laundry on Chol HaMoed is very difficult for people to keep. And many people don't keep it. Not because it's not an Isur, it's very difficult. So here's where we say, don't protest, and people do it, and just because people are not protesting against it is because it's known that people will not listen to the Isur. Let's leave it at that. This is a very important topic. And again, according to how you learn Pshat and Dingamara, some poskim try to be matir a little bit more than others. Moving on to the next malacha regarding Chol HaMoed. We're back now to Chol HaMoed. So the rule is anything that's included in the Lamates Malachas, beginning with that, is asur to do on Chol HaMoed. One of the Lamates Malachas is writing. And here the Mishnah will give you the exception. The Elu Koisvim B'Moed, the following people are allowed to write on Chol HaMoed. Now, why are we giving a heter? Before we read the cases, big machlokes. Tosfos says that all of the cases that the Mishnah gives will be included in the heter of Davar Ha'aved, says Tosfos. Okay, let's leave it at that. And many argue, and again, there's a big to do with the writing. Says the Mishnah, Kedushay Nashim. Mashma, that Kedushin, like we already quoted, which is what Shmuel says, could be done on Chol HaMoed. Marriage is Kedushin and Nesuyin, even though our minig is to do Kedushin by giving money, Kesef or Shava Kesef, we give a Shava, we give a ring, but one of the other options is writing a document. And even if the document itself has no value, it doesn't even have the value of a pruta, the fact that on the document you wrote, that affects Kedushin. That document is allowed to be written. Number two, Gittin. Now, Gittin is very important that the Rishonim speak out. Did we not learn that there are many things that we can't do on Chol HaMoed because it says V'samachta b'chagecha? Don't do something that goes against simcha. Isn't a get going against v'samachta b'chagecha? A very important answer. And we know this. People don't get divorced on a whim. By the time the get was decided to be given, and now all you need to do is execute it, the tsar of the separation you're done with. Adarabah. Once a couple made that decision, the actual finalization is not going against the v'samachta b'chagecha. Number 3, v'shoivrin, receipts. So if people owe money to each other, and obviously if I owe you money and you have a document, the smartest thing for me is when I give you the money, give me back that document. But I gave you the money, you don't have the document on you. And we don't see each other that often. We saw each other chalamayit. Again, these are things that if you don't do it now, I want to go back. If you don't do it now, that's toishless. You might not get another opportunity. We'll get the kedushin in the Gemara. By a get, we know many times the ex-husband and wife are not in the same city. God forbid, sometimes we are afraid that maybe she'll refuse to receive. So these are things that do it. A receipt, a daitike, as we know, is that Chazal said that if a person is called a shchiv merav, someone is under deathbed, God forbid, their words are as empowered halachically as making a kinyan. Whatever they say is what is going to happen, but it has to be documented. Not that you need the document as to affect the kinyan. You need a document to know what did that person say. So a person is on their deathbed and they are making certain instructions. Now everyone knows exactly what they said. Write it down. Write it down on Chalamoid. Matana, same thing. We know why a gift. I don't owe a gift. If I'm not going to give you a gift today, and one of the ways of doing it is documenting it, maybe tomorrow I'll change my mind. So the recipient or the potential recipient of the gift will argue it's a davar ha'aved if you don't write it. Write it down now. Prusbul. Now, guys, I know that prusbul is something that we do Erev Rosh Hashanah. Let's not jump on prusbul. The main relinquishment of the debt happens at the end of Shemitah year. We're learning this in Tafshin Pei Beis. I know that we articulated the prusbul Erev Rosh Hashanah. We're going to do it again. But you know what's amazing? That even if someone didn't make a prusbul in the beginning of the 7th year, as long as they wrote a prusbul before the end of that year, it's going to prevent for there to be a relinquishment of the debts. If for whatever reason, we are villagers, we don't have access to people that are scribes, but the only time you go into the city is on a Yom Tov. So it's Pesach, write it down. If now is the opportunity, write it down. Igrois Shum. Igrois Shums are letters of evaluation. Rashi tells us, Igrois Shum, you have brothers, and their father passed away, and now you have to know, before you decide who's getting what part of the estate, you have to know what the value is on house A, on house B. Beis Din made an evaluation. If the opportunity to document it is now, don't say maybe we'll get to Sefer later. Do it now. The Igris Mazon. Igris Mazon is when a man is going to get married, there are certain obligations that he has by default, and there are certain obligations that he doesn't have. For example, if a man marries a woman that already has children, he's not mechuyev to give muzaynas to her children, but he can undertake that obligation. So many people, they had the standard ksuba. You had to add in details that are not, almost like ta'u sefer. You don't even have to write it in. It's a given. Write it down on chalamoyit. Shtare chalitza. Chalitza is not affected with the document, but if a chalitza happened, you have to have a record that this woman got a chalitza. Again, you can always say, maybe we can do it after Yom Tov. Don't maybe. Do it now. Miyun. Miyun is a woman whose father passed away. She's a minor. Rabbinically, her mother and her older brother, they have the right, rabbinically, to marry her off. Being that it's only a rabbinic marriage, if prior to her bas mitzvah, she makes a declaration, we learned the machlokes, whether it's in front of 2 people, whether it's in front of a beis din, she says, I refuse to be with him. Her refusal is like a get. It retroactively nullifies that rabbinic marriage. And again, it's her declaration that stops the marriage, that retroactively nullifies the marriage. But you have to document it because people later will argue she never made a miyun. Shitrei birurim, Rashi says, there's a certificate of selection. It's more than the evaluation. Beis Din selected. They said that house A to Reuven, house B to Shimon. And people are afraid that it's going to be forgotten. Write it down. any gzeira of Beis Din, if they come with a new gzeira, it has to be documented to know exactly what they said. And finally, the Igorei Shel Roshus Machloikis, Rashi says that if there's a governmental decree, we're being practical. The government makes a decree. People have to know what they made, because if people will violate the decree, they'll get in trouble. Right on Chol HaMoed that the government said you got to wear a mask, whatever, and hang it up. Write it. People should know what the government is decreeing. Okay, says the Gemara, Amar Shmuel, and you would even argue that Shmuel is just not adding anything to the Mishnah. He is. Even though the Mishnah said the first that you can write Kedushei Nashim, it's not necessarily what you think it is. Shmuel was the one that explicitly said, a man is allowed to affect Kedushin. We can do the halachic engagement on Chol HaMoed. Why? Guys, we're not speaking about writing. Kedushin can be done with the kesef, the way it's done Shabbat kesef. We are contrasting this with a Mishnah that we learned, that ein noisen nashim b'moed, because ein ma'aven simcha b'simcha. So why don't we say the same thing for Kedushin? Says Shmuel, Shema yikadmenu acher. Because if you're not going to give the Kedushin now, maybe by the time you wake up, someone else will give her Kedushin. Says the Gemara, well, lema misayele. It's funny how sometimes the Gemara says, it's a kasha. Why do I need an amoida? It's a Mishnah. The Gemara here is formulating it as a proof. A proof, it says in our Mishnah, the Elu Koisum Mamai, Kedushei Nashim. My love, Shitrei, Kedushin, Mamosh. So the Gemara says, no, just learning the Mishnah, we would not come with a definite conclusion as we now know from Shmuel. Because maybe, our Mishnah is speaking about Shtadei Psikasa. Shtadei Psikasa is what we call the Tanoim. After the Kedushin is made, right, or sometimes before the Kedushin is made, the families of the Hassan and the families of the Kala make an agreement of how much money this side will give, how much money that side will give. This happens nowadays when we do the engagement. Families get together and they have to discuss, we're half and half, they're all different formulations. And many times they come to an agreement. Now, normally when you come to an agreement, you have to make a kinyan. There is a unique halacha that if they came to a verbal agreement prior to the Kedushin, then the Chassan gave the ring to the Kala. That kinyan of Kedushin also is a kinyan on everything that they agree to. So it's binding. Now that it's binding, you have to document it for people to know, for them not to say, I just made a verbal commitment that I'm not bound by it. You are. So in other words, maybe our Mishnah is speaking about a case that a guy gave Kedushin to his Kala before Yom Tov. Prior to giving her the ring, they made this agreement as to who was paying for what in the wedding. And it wasn't documented ahead of Yom Tov, so the Mishnah says, write it on Chol HaMoed, because the more time goes on, the more you are opening yourself up to someone forgetting, and then there'll be a machlokes. So maybe the Mishnah is only referring to that which Kidra Gidul Amarav, Don't Gidul Amarav, that when you have this discussion, Kama Atonoisen Levincha, Kach V'Kach, Kama Atonoisen Levitcha, Kach V'Kach. If the parties have a discussion and they make a only verbal commitment without a kinyan, prior to the Kedushin, if right afterwards the Kedushin is affected, under the Kechu, the kinyan doesn't only make the Kedushin, it binds legally the financial commitment from each family. And hein hadvarim that are niklin even only through Amira. So maybe our Mishnah would only be referring to documenting that. That's why we need Shmuel, or it's not a raya to Shmuel who says something else, who's saying you can actually affect a Kedushin, and if you are doing it through a shtar, the kesef ubishtar ubebiyah, you can write the shtar. Again, it says above, right, daf ches, with all the details like psulois, le'almonois, le'miyavlim, b'pnei shesimchi loim. So let's infer from the Mishnah that the only problem is Nisuyin. Hala Ades Shari. So the Gemara says, no, without Shmuel, I would have said, Loimi Boya Kamer. That Mishnah, that Chesamad Beis, is formulated in a Loimi Boya. The Mishnah doesn't even have to write the more obvious. The Mishnah writes the bigger chiddush. Loimi Boya Lo Ades. Since getting engaged is certainly not a mitzvah, it's a preliminary, but it's not a mitzvah proper. For sure, you can't get. You would have said you can't do kiddushin on Chol HaMoed, Ella, you would have thought afilu lisa nami, getting married, the ka'avid mitzvah, guys. We spoke about this a few times already. Is there a mitzvah to get married? It's for sure a mitzvah to have children. It's for sure prohibited to have children outside the institution of marriage. We're not debating that. Question is the marriage a hechshen mitzvah, or is marriage itself a mitzvah? That's our Gemara here with the big machlokes. Marriage is definitely, according to Rashi, the mitzvah is only pru'uravu. But the marriage is the final step needed. Now you can do pru'uravu. So bottom line is, there is no proof to Shmuel, or you can't ask on Shmuel who needed you. We had it in the Mishnah, but Shmuel is being mechadesh, and now this clarifies that our Mishnah even allows doing Kiddushin itself. Now we're going to bring a proof, a proper proof to Shmuel. Is Tashema, I'm going to prove that Shmuel is right from another work of Tanoim, but not in the Mishnah. That there was a Braisa that was taught in the yeshiva of Shmuel, where it says clearly, Ma'orsin, that we are allowed to effect an engagement on Cholamoid. Avoloi Koinsin, but not Nesuyin. And not only that, the Ein Oisim Seudas Erusim. So there is a concept of Eima Arvin Simcha B'Simcha. And it's interesting. We consider the festival, the Seuda of Erusin, heightens the joy. Don't do that. Don't do that on Cholamoid. Like we learned that whole sugya. The more you are invested in one joy, the more you are divested from another joy. Focus on Cholamoid, but the actual Kiddushin you are allowed to do. And furthermore, indeed, Shmamina, clearly that Shmuel is correct. Now we got a problem. Me, Amar Shmuel, that the reason why you are allowed to do Kiddushin is because if you won't do it, Shema Yikadmeno Acher. How can you say that? Amar Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Chol Yoim V'Yoim, every single day, Baskol Yotzes V'Meres, Bas Pliny LePliny, so they Pliny LePliny, who you will marry the physical parts of the world. That'll be no Alpi Chasidus, Alpi Pnimius. That it's your avoida is to do the birurim there. Your avoida is to bring Mashiach there. That is yours. And if the only person that has the koyach to be mevared or to bring godliness, to bring Mashiach in that area is you will end up with that part in the world. I want to handle something that when Shmuel is saying that every day they make this announcement. When we learned the Sugi and Soita, we said Arboim Yoim Kodim Mitziras Hablat. This is more every day. You know what every day means? It means even after you're married. They don't stop when you're married. A person is married. And if God forbid they're going through a hard patch, it's good for their neshama to get this reaffirmment. You married your bashet. Bashet doesn't mean it was going to be easy. But it was your bashet. That's your avoid in life. So if it's announced every day for marriage, always, you are going to marry so-and-so. So how is it shaykh that someone else is going to take her away? Ella, therefore, we added another word. Shemo yikadneno acher berachamin. That maybe someone will take away your bashert. Now, take away your bashert. I want to walk back those words. There's a big machlokes rishonim how to learn pshat. Rashi has a very unique interpretation. Rashi here is saying, if you look inside the Rashi, I'll say it by heart, that even prayer cannot change you marrying your bashert. The only thing prayer can do is that if, let's say, Reuven and Rachel was bashert for Shimon, but Reuven wants to marry her. Reuven's prayer will never make Reuven marry her, but it can hurt, and it can make for her to pass away, or for their chassan to pass away. It can get into the way of that marriage. And once they are engaged, we are hoping such prayers won't happen. And now let's have, again, this is a very unique approach, and let's read the Gemara the way Rashi learns it. Rava once heard, Rava overheard someone's prayer, and he was saying, "Tis damen li planisa." He was asking for such and such a woman to become his wife. No, he wasn't davening for him to get married. He was davening for a specific person. So Rava told him, "Loiti boye rachmi hachi davenish like this. It's a futile prayer because mimanavshach ichaz yilach. If she was bashert for you, then loy ozlaminach. You'll get her. I'm not saying you shouldn't daven. Daven that you should get married sooner than later. Without prayer, maybe you won't find her that quick. daven Hashem, I want to begin my life in marriage. Let me find my basher. But if she was not designated for you, now there's a big machlokes in the Girs and the Gemara. We're going to read Gemara Rashi is kafart b'Hashem. You'll come to deny God because if she was not designated for you, you will never get her. You're gonna say my prayers are unanswered, and all that. Prayers are answered. God is not listening to my prayers. God is not able to answer my prayers or any other narishkeit, only because you're praying something that cannot happen. Now, not only that, this person accepted what Rava said. So Basar Hachi Shamada Kamar, this person still davened. Again, Rashi is learning that he understood that there is still place for a prayer. Not a nice prayer, but there's place for a prayer. What did he daven? He told God, since this guy wanted to marry Rachel, he had a woman who he wanted to marry, so he says, Ihu lemus mikama. He says, listen, I cannot see her marrying anyone else. If she's not my basher, God, take me away. Let me die before she gets married. Or ihi tamus mikame, or let her pass away prior to her getting married to her basher. Rava heard that prayer, and again he was upset at him. Don't daven about this. This is a depraved prayer. You should die not to see her. She should die. But a person could make such a davening. And that davening we learned today on Daf Amud Aleph, even if you're not the shalit, bris krusa l'sfasayim. Gewaldig. So that's the pshat according to Rashi. What's the rachamim? That maybe you're not going to lose her, but maybe someone else is going to want to marry her, and he's going to daven not to want to see her getting engaged to you. God forbid, he'll daven for her to pass away. Al derech the tefilla that we have from the person that was ritzeach nefesh bishgaga, that he can daven for the kohen gadol to pass away. At kan Rashi. Now, we are all familiar with the other Rishonim that have a whole different approach, and they actually hold that through Rachamei, you can actually change who you're going to get married to. There's a third approach that even once bashert, you might not marry initially. That means a person can get married twice in life. And when that happens, lav dafka, it means that your second wife is not your bashert. It could be the opposite. It could be the second wife was supposed to be your first wife. V'chulei. So they actually hold many other Rishonim that tefillah can mamash change it. Be that as it may, even according to Rashi, that's why you are allowed to affect Kiddushin for people who might daven such a depraved prayer. They're not going to daven that after its effect. Okay. Now, whether the word hachi goes on above or further, as well as other ahead, other ahin, either hachi amar or amar rav mishum Rebbe Reuven ben itzre bobili, that you should know this concept, and this is very important. We know the emes. Everything is hashgacha pratis. Hashgacha pratis is not unique to whom you're getting married and to what part of the world do you have to own in order for you to affect your birurin. But there's concealed hashgacha pratis and there's revealed hashgacha pratis. In these two areas of life, it's God involved in my life with less levushim. And by the way, that explains that almost all married people, after they're married, will realize that there's no greater comedy or there's no greater mismatch, that me and my wife are opposites. So why did they get married? Because God got involved. If not for God, you never would have gotten married. Adarabah, you see the hashgacha pratis in a marriage. And the same thing in exactly what you're doing. And we see that it says, Min ha'toiru, u'min ha'navim, u'min ha'ksuvim. We see that Mahashem isha lo ish. Now, again, everything is Mahashem, but it's begolui, it's revealed. Min ha'toiru. As it says, Vayam lavanu b'sol vayomru Mahashem yatsa hadav. It's even people that are klipa, the sitra achram, there's such a gilui elikus when it comes to marriage that they admit it. It's revealed. Hashem's hand is revealed. Min hanavim, as the guys were in the first medium line, this is regarding Shimshon. Shimshon married a woman that's not Hapalishti, and they didn't want it, but you couldn't help it because so it was going to happen. Min aksuvim dichsiv that bias in a house and wealth is nachlas avos, something that you get from your parents. You were born wealthy, but umahashem isha maskeles. The intelligent woman is directly from God. Okay. In the name of Rav Ben Itzraboili, or the following was actually recorded in a Braisa. In a Braisa, we record Rav Ben Itzraboili. Interestingly, in other words, now we're going into the final topic of today, which is huge. It's huge. Ein Adam nechshad b'davar elim kein asoi. Oy gewalt. If there is a suspicion on someone, they only suspect him because he did it. The imloi asa kuloi, not that he did it. Maybe he didn't do everything that they're saying, but he did some of what they're saying. And if he didn't do mitzvasai epis, he thought about doing it. He didn't believe alasai. Or even if he never thought for himself to do it, but he might have seen someone else do it, and he was there, wow, that's nice. He's shaykh to that sin. If not, there never would have been around. We're going to challenge that. Masav Rabbi Yaakov, how can you say that? Beginning with Malachim. When we have a pasuk that says, Vayachvu b'nei Yisrael dvarim, asher loikein al Hashem alokehem, that they thought up, they imputed. There was like a rumor that the Yidden were making regarding God, something not positive, which is not true. Clear. You can make a rumor on someone. In our case, it's not true. So the Gemara said, nah, sure. Hassan lahachesu da'avim. If the source of the rumor are coming from people that want to provoke God, here begin with the exceptions. We're going to say that means in a rumor. That means if someone is trying to get you angry, to press your button, they can make a rumor that's not shaykh to you. We're speaking about that didn't come from someone that's lahachis. Another tashema. This is we know this terrible chazal when it says vayikanu l'Moshe b'machna regarding la'aharon who's kedosh Hashem. The pshat is that's the machlokes of Koren that they were jealous regarding Aaron's appointment. No, so chazal tell us that vayikanu l'Moshe. We know from Soita that if a person is suspecting that his wife is connected to a specific individual beyond the boundaries of marriage, of the commitment that couple made, that he has to warn her. He has to tell her in front of Tuwaitim, I don't want you to be secluded with that person. So say Chazal, that's called kinui. Right? Remember, kinui and stira. So Rav Shmuel by Yitzchak Aman Melamed called Echad kinui leishtami Moshe. People were throwing a suspicion, the chutzpah, that Moshe was intimate with their wives. And there was the many people that were against Moshe, they actually warned their wives, halachically, don't be with Moshe, because there was a rumor. So what are you telling me that if there's a rumor, so there was a rumor that Moshe Rabbeinu got, this is not shaykh to him. So the Gemara says, Hassan Mishum Sina Da'abud. If the ones spreading the rumor have a Sina against you, so here is another exception. So they can create a rumor that's not shaykh to you. I'm going to bring this down and why it's important to know this soon. Tashema, a practical application of this. Tashema, Amar Rabbi Yosi, Yihi Chelki. May my portion be in Nisha Choshten Oise B'Davra Ve'Einboy. You know, when there is a rumor against you that is not true, that you're not shaykh to, it's very painful. And that pain, it brings a big atonement for our mistakes. So Rabbi Yosi says, Halavai, I should be from those who there are rumors against me, which is obviously not true. That's a kasha. But he said, making a statement that if there's a rumor, if there's smoke, there's fire. And similarly, of Amar of Papa Lididi Chashtun, not only Halavai, I experienced in my life that I was suspected of things, V'lo Yahababi, not V'lo Yahababi that I didn't do it. But like we said above, I never thought about it. If I saw another person doing it, I'm not shaykh to that. So the Gemara says, Loi Kasha, here are the words. What rumor has to have some truth to it, unless it's coming from Lahachis or from Sina? That's because of the pasuk. Forget, what did Rabbi Yosi daven for? What did Rav Papa say when there was a rumor for a small amount of time? A rumor that goes and stops could be zero truth. The statement that we learned of Rabbi Reuven that it's Rabili is because of the loy pasuk, a rumor that doesn't stop. Now, how do you define that? It depends where. If you're living in a town, a day and a half, different time amounts. There's so much to speak about, but it's just a concept. You know, now because of the internet, because of the world that we live in, the viral world, we have to know how to apply it nowadays. but the concept at least, that if the rumor persists, that is where we're saying there's some emes to it. Again, unless it's coming from one's enemy. Furthermore, let's go to the day and a half. What happens if the total time of the rumor was for a day and a half, but it wasn't consecutive? It wasn't straight. There wasn't an interruption. There was a rumor for a day, and it stopped. Then there was again a rumor for a whole other day, or for a half. You have the total day and a half, but it wasn't together. Furthermore, when it stopped, why did it stop? You have to find out. Sometimes the rumor stopped is because the source is true, but they are afraid of retribution. So if it was stopped because of retribution, then it being interrupted doesn't have significance. Furthermore, that if the rumor, right, stopped, did not stop because of fear, right? And therefore it's not considered this kala delay pasak. That's only ela delay hadanava. That's only that if it came back up, it didn't come back up for a full day and a half. Avol hadanava, but if the rumor was for a day and it was interrupted, not because of fear of retribution, but when it came back, now it came back for a day and a half. There was one full day and a half. Then the rumor has something to it. And now does the person have enemies? Then we can always say that enemies created the rumor. I want you to know that I want to bring it down to something practical. That Tzemach Tzedek wrote a tshuva regarding, first of all, a rumor is not proof, but a rumor will have a lot of halachic power. And we don't have enough time to go into that, but we're going to learn a lot about this, when it comes to Hilchas Ishus, if there is a rumor on one's spouse, what effect does it have? When it comes to dinamaminus, if there are rumors that certain people are not behaving financially correct, there are times that you are obligated to take a rumor into account. There are times that you have to discount a rumor, or you could discount a rumor. That Tzemach Tzedek wrote that other than children, everyone has an enemy. And what was his point? His point is, I want to come back that if a child, example, child is saying that adult molested him or her, so that has a big koyach, more than in other cases. Because why would a child have an enemy? It's very unusual for a child to have an enemy. But the kid said, at least we got all of the words in Chazal. So if there's an enemy, or if there's someone who hates you, they're not your enemy, they have sina. Or if there's someone that's trying to provoke you, then the rumor is garnished. But if you don't have any of those three, and it's a rumor that's going uninterrupted, then we go back, then the rumor has something. And the final practical application of this is that if someone is making up a rumor on you, it's important to deny it. I know you can't chase all rumors, but the way rumors are stopped many times is when the victim doesn't do anything. But if it's not true, you have to make a declaration that this rumor sheker, that has a certain power to counter the rumor. We'll leave it at that, and God willing, tomorrow to continue with the new Mishnah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
We're good, Chavra? A lot of Gemara today. Nails, marriage rumors.